most of you who may have been dealing with Horizon 2020 in any way may have come across the concept of responsible research and innovation. And I think that highlights some aspects that any approach to data ethics needs to take into account. This is an innovation that also requires to be done responsibly. So what does responsible innovation include? Well, doing science and innovation with society and for society, including the involvement of society very upstream in the process, so not at the very end, but from the beginning, and to align the outcomes with the values of society. And responsible research and innovation could be understood as a shift in responsibility, the shift from thinking in terms of individualist and consequentialist notions of responsibility to thinking in terms of more collective and distributed responsibility and processes. And I think that is something that is needed, and I think Magna Carta for data shouldn't just be focused on individual rights in relation to data, but also in relation to, well, what do those who deal with the data, who develop those innovations, how do they include the concerns that society might have about this? And yeah, maybe just another idea on how would that look like. Well, one definition there could be a transparent interactive process by which societal actors and innovators become mutually responsive to each other with a view to the ethical acceptability, sustainability, and societal desirability of the innovation process and its marketable projects, in order to allow a proper embedding of scientific and technological advances in our society. And so what that means is there is an important for companies and innovators of taking responsibilities for this process and not just producing the innovations and leaving it to the rest to deal with it, but to be actively engaged in fostering an engagement with these issues. For thinking about this in relation to the data sector, I think it's important to consider some of the work that has been done in relation to value-sensitive design. So first of all, this idea, well, the technologies we use are not completely neutral. They're not technologies that are there to be used for good or bad, but also already in what we have as a technologies, we have assumptions being made, we have goals being assumed, we have values being realized in certain ways. And so there's the concept of embedded values that Helen Nissenbaum, who also is a prominent proponent of theories of privacy, that she proposed. And so really highlighting that all technologies already implicitly embed values as well as biases in relation to the goals they achieve, the context of use, the assumed user characteristics, and the specific technical implementation. And once we assume that, how can we make sure that the design process of a technology and the implementation process of a technology takes account of these? There's been proposals, for example, by Batya Friedman and her value-sensitive design lab to really identify a fairly clear process of how to go about doing a design process that takes account of values. And so the aim is to ensure that the technologies, and in this case the data practices linked to the technologies, that these technologies meet complex human needs and open up new possibilities of living a good life rather than restricting them or channeling them or forcing practices on an unwilling adopter. And so there's a wide range of values that can be taken into account. So it's not just privacy and freedom, human welfare, there can be a lot of other issues, including environmental sustainability, identity-related issues. I think in relation to data, a lot of the concerns that people have that their data is being sold off and compiled and reassembled has something to do with concerns they have about identity, not just privacy. So the process of value-sensitive design in particular looks at a combination of values analysis in relation to a technology, a stakeholder analysis, so what do different people who are affected or involved in relation to the use of this technology, and a technical analysis, and that these need to be integrated. And that, let's say, the value analysis and stakeholder analysis doesn't just come after the technology has been developed, but that happens upstream. So just as the responsible research and innovation definition was stating as well. One particular issue is to identify biases. So it's about the positive values you try to identify, just as well as the ways in which the realization of such positive values may be hindered by biases that are implicit in the technology. So, for example, in relation to pre-existing biases, so technologies embodying pre-existing biases in relation to gender, for example, technical biases, biases towards types of presentation, so the use of graphic rather than text-based interface can have an impact on who can use it and how it can be used, so in relation to justice and accessibility. And other questions that can arise in relation to just once you have a new context of use, new questions may arise, so you may not be always able to foresee them, but once it emerges that there are these issues, they also need to be addressed.